Итак, добрый день, друзья. Мы начинаем сегодня наш второй вебинар по поиску работы в Австралии. Сегодня у нас тема «Как подаваться на работу», как это делать правильно и максимально эффективно. Вот, в гостях у нас Инека Reed, Инека Ранги. And we are starting. Начинаем, Инека. So let's
Thank you
get
so
going.
much for having me back for a second session. So welcome to session 2 in terms of applying for a job in Australia. This session is being recorded, so will be available online afterwards along with the presentation, so the slide pack in case you'd like to read them further. Please post any questions you have along the way in the chat function, and we can answer them live throughout this session. And we'll make sure that we look at those before moving on to the next topic. So, as we've previously mentioned, we've put a series of webinars together to try and help with the process of looking and applying for a job in Australia and the Australian market. Today, we will be covering applying for a job, so specifically talking about cover letters and resumes. Tomorrow, we have a similar session at the same time, Australian time, where we'll be talking about interviews, so how to prepare for the interview, as well as some tips and tricks depending on whether it's virtual or face-to-face in Australia. And then our final session the following week is on the Monday, the 23rd of May, Australian time at 4 p.m. again. And we'll be talking about working in Australia. So flexible working options, leave, tax, superannuation, which is like a pension, and how to prepare for your first day in the office or virtually, depending on the role. So today, as I said, we'll be talking about cover letters and resumes. You've done your research, you've found your job that you think you're right to apply for. And so now this is going to talk you through how you actually go about that process. There's 2 key items that you will be asked for when you apply for a role, majority of the time, and that is a cover letter and a resume, or a CV. Resumes can also be called. So our plan is to break these down in more detail, give you some live examples. I've also interviewed a talent acquisition manager, which is a recruiter in Australia, to get their insights around what they would suggest, as well as things to avoid, things like that. So it's a lot of information that you're trying to cram down into a few pages. So we'll try to make it as succinct or short as possible. So we'll jump into that detail now, and then we'll at the end of this session have an option for questions and answers. So anything we haven't answered throughout the session, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll make sure we cover them. So first of all, cover letters. So a cover letter is extremely common in Australia when applying for roles, and there's a few key things to remember. It's a short letter, so 1 page maximum. It could be an email depending on the job, but they would specify in the job ad if they wanted an email. Majority of the time it will be a letter, and it accompanies your resume, and really it's about getting them to read on. So getting them to get excited about you as a candidate and read more information in your resume. So the difference between a resume and a cover letter, I've tried to explain there. They really should complement each other. It's about a first page to get you to read more detail. There needs to be some keywords that get picked up in an automatic search that hit the requirements of the job that you're applying for. So don't be afraid to use the same language or the same words in the job ad, in your cover letter, and also in your resume. So a cover letter is typically no longer than 1 page. It could even be half a page. The resume can be up to 3 pages, no longer, but we'll go into resumes in more detail soon. So really, your cover letter is your first impression. It's the first point of contact you have with the company you're applying for. And something you need to be mindful of is if there's a lot of people applying for the job, it may not even be a person that reads your cover letter first. It could be what's known as an applicant tracking system, ATS, which is a machine. And that machine will be programmed to pick up keywords. If your cover letter doesn't cover those keywords, it will just be scrapped from the application pool and they will look at other applicants that have. So usually it's first impression with a person, could be first impression with a computer. So it's really important that you get it right. So it needs to be tailored to the job that you're applying for. Don't use the same cover letter for every job you apply for. They need to be tweaked so that it's relevant to the role and the company. It's really important to give them a sense of who you are. So highlight who you are, your skills, your experience, and your background. You should feel comfortable to explain your background and why you're applying for the job, why you're moving to Australia, because that goes to give colour towards the individual that they're looking to apply for. So don't feel embarrassed or nervous about sharing that information. It's really important and could be very favourable in a number of jobs because employers are keen to help wherever they can. The third thing is really attention to detail. So you need to show why you're a good fit for a role, but one thing that all hiring managers will value is attention to detail. So spelling mistakes, typos, the correct date on the cover letter, these are all really small things, but really important. And it would be important whether you're applying for a role as a chef, a tradesperson, like a builder or a concreter, if you're applying for a marketing role, a legal role, anything. It's a really important skill that is important across all those disciplines. I think it's also very important to keep in mind that successful people, or the people that are usually reading these cover letters once they've been screened through a system, are busy. So make their lives easy. As I said, highlight keywords that are put it in the job ad, key values or phrases from the company website. Anything you can do to make their life easier will go a long way in getting you pushed through the application process. So do your research, have a look on the website, see if there's a section around values or mission statement. Can you steal a couple of buzzwords or keywords from that website, and make sure you include them there. I've also put a link on this page to a really useful article on seek.com.au, which is a website we mentioned last week. And they actually have some cover letter do's and don'ts tips on their website. So that link will take you to that article if you'd like to read more. So how to write your cover letter. So there are heaps of templates that you can find online. Use one of those templates and it should look like a letter. So it should have the date, your contact information, so a phone number, an email, depending on whether you're in Australia versus overseas, you should put your preferred means of contact there. So keep in mind of the time difference if you're in Poland, for example, and then address the hiring manager or who the job contact is listed in the job ad. So that's who your letter should be addressed to. Then, as I mentioned, it's a brief introduction, why you're interested. As I said, feel comfortable, if you are, feel comfortable to share your personal circumstances around why you're looking for a role in Australia. Give a snapshot of your relevant skills and experience and qualifications if they're relevant. And when I say snapshot, I mean 2 sentences. It really should be brief. And then note that your resume is there. So if they're interested, they can read for more information. And that's where you can put a lot more detail about your skills, experience, qualifications, certifications, etc. in your resume. That's when you can go into more at length. Remembering the ATS, so the applicant tracking system I mentioned previously, will also apply to your resume. So keywords use the same language that the job ad uses, that they use on their company website, so that this system just picks up on those terms and again filters your application through. Another really useful thing is in the job ad, have a look at the language. If there's a bit of personality, company personality coming through, then feel free to put that in your cover letter as well, so that it shows that you would be a good cultural fit to work with this organisation. And then signing off saying that you're happy to provide more information, you'd welcome a further conversation with someone, and then a kind regards, and then your name. So as you can see, it's quite short. It's really just, if you think about when you open a book, it's the foreword, it's the first page to give you a taste of what you're about to read. and then there's more detail to be applied later. Another really useful thing to think about is, depending on where you are through your visa process, if you've been successful in applying for your visa and you've received a visa that entitles you to work in Australia already, it's really important to put that in your cover letter to say that you've got valid working rights and you've got a relevant or a recent international police check or clearance, because that's really important to a lot of employers, which a lot of Australian citizens and residents don't have. And it adds time to when they can get an application through the door and have someone working for an organisation. So you've shortcutted and you've already taken a big step to make you a far more attractive employee than potentially someone already in Australia who's lived and worked here for a period of time. So a key requirement of a lot of your visas will be an international police check, which you will have known if you've gone through the process already. This is great for employers to know that you've already done that or you're in the process of doing. So some tips here around how to improve your cover letter. So I thought I would just quickly touch on these, and then I have a job ad that I found on Seek, and I thought we could just go through and do a very quick live session there around how a cover letter could be structured. So use clear and concise language, which means short words, not big, flowery textbook words. Keep it short and simple, easy for them to read. As I said, tailor it to the company and to the job. Don't just have a standard letter that you send to 20 different employers. It will be obvious and it will get pushed down the pile of who they look for. You don't want it to seem like it's reused, your cover letter. Check your spelling and grammar. If you can, have someone else look over it just to check it for you. And as I said, keep it to a single page. And then again, I found a very funny article on Seek where they had interviewed a number of employers and asked them what are their 5 top things that they wish people knew when writing a cover letter. So again, that's an easy read for you to have a look at, just to see from the employer's perspective who are reading these letters once they've been screened. One thing that made me laugh was people try to get quite creative with really small text and really small margins. So they put a lot of information on that cover letter. And an employer was saying, if I'm reading this at 11 o'clock at night and I have to reach for my glasses, it's easier for me to reach for another cover letter and read someone else's application. So make it easy for them. So if you bear with me now, we're going to have a look at a role I found online. So I just went to seek.com.au and I looked for a role in marketing in Brisbane. And this role came up for EB Games, which is a massive online gaming company who are looking for a national design and product production manager. So if we scroll down here, we can see a blurb that they've put here. And as you read through the language, they've tried to make it interesting, they've tried to make it funny, and they've tried to make it seem relaxed. So this tells me in this first 2 paragraphs that this is a tech company, it's relaxed, and they're looking for someone with some personality. So not overly formal, but still structured. So if you then go down here, they tell you a bit more about the company. And they say we are 25 years young rather than 25 years old or 25 years established. So already they're going to value someone with a bit of a sense of humour and again, a cover letter that really pops out. So it stands out from the pack. They tell you how many retail stores. So already I'm thinking if I've got retail experience, that would be really useful. Any sort of gaming or tech experience would be really useful. Love this final sentence where they say, ultimately we sell fun. So something I would put in my cover letter is I'm looking for a fun place to work. I'm looking for a fun work culture. So keywords that I can already pull out of here. You could say if you've got any familiarity, or prior experience with any of these big companies, Warner Brothers, Xbox, these are international companies. Once we scroll down here, the non-corporate stuff. So it's a great place to work. Addictive vibe. So again, vibe would be a word I would try to put into my job application if I can in any way. We scroll down here. White would be a great opportunity. So have you previously run a design and production team? In my cover letter, if this role was for me, I would say, I have previously run a design and production team. You don't have to worry about writing word for word what is in there, because that, again, will hit their keyword search. Looking down a bit further, I would make sure there is a role in there where I was a marketing manager, or I have prior experience working with marketing managers. Scrolling down a bit further, is there anything that you could say around prior experience making a company more productive or profitable, or something there that links to price, saving, things like that. So if you're not sure about any of these words or terms, Google them. Google Translate will help a lot, I think, as you're writing these cover letters, and you'll be able to see a word that might translate that you'll feel comfortable with. Down here, project management. These are all words, again, that I would make sure were included in my 2-3 sentences I had in my cover letter around prior experience. And a nice way you could sign off your letter is, I really enjoyed reading this job ad, and I'm really looking forward to an opportunity to come and experience something truly unique by working with you. So see how I just reworded this final sentence they have in the job ad into a nice way to close out the letter. So again, this will hopefully translate to a number of different roles, but hopefully just gave you a bit of a flavour of a way that you can write this letter to make it interesting, it stand out, and it's relevant to the job that you're applying for. Conscious that was also very brief, but I just want to make sure that we cover the important things. Before I move on to resumes, are there some questions?
Yes, there is a question about analyzing vacancies just as you have done. How is it possible to train, to analyze, and to pick up the best, the most appropriate keywords?
Okay, so I think having a look on those job boards, Seek would be my first recommendation. Another website which I've linked in this pack is called Indeed, INDEED. And these are large platforms in Australia where multiple employers post their jobs. And really, it's about doing some research. So putting in some filters to your field. So if you're looking at marketing, filtering by marketing roles, and having a look so you get comfortable, and you'll start to see we're not very imaginative a lot of the time in Australia. We use the same words over and over. So you'll start to get familiar and a bit of a flavour with words that are very common in your industry, or what they call buzzwords. So I think if you can print them off, great, because then you can get a trusty highlighter or a pen and circle words that you see repeated in multiple jobs ads, and you can see these are words that you want to make sure you have in your cover letter and in your resume. I think as well, getting comfortable with the way that the job ads are structured in Australia. So there's always that main first bit, which is more around the industry and where this company sits in the industry. The second section is usually around the company specifically. So we're 25 years young. We have over 400 stores, retail stores. We employ X amount of people. The next section will be around who they're looking for. So why would you be a good applicant to apply? And in that section is where you'll see things like they're looking for someone with 10 years management experience, or proven experience in this type of software or that sort of web design software. And so really understanding the structure of the job ad, circling those keywords, and just looking at a lot of job ads. So unfortunately, there's no shortcut. There's a bit of detective work you need to do. And as I said, Google Translate. So if there's a word like resilience and that doesn't translate easily into Ukrainian, put it into Google Translate and see what a similar word or phrase might mean. And when you're writing your cover letter, make sure you use the Australian term so that system I was talking about, ATS, picks up on the Australian word rather than something you've translated to Ukrainian and forgot to translate back.
Thanks very much, Inika. And another question is about what usually should be in the cover letter. Some people just put a brief version of their resume. How correct or incorrect is that?
So it is correct. You want to make sure that it has the relevant parts of your resume. So if you worked in a cafe 20 years ago, but you're applying for a senior role in marketing, I don't think they're going to care that you worked in a cafe. Unless you're applying for a senior marketing role, which is a chain for hospitality. So what you put in your cover letter needs to be brief, it needs to be relevant to the job, and it needs to give a bit of your personality. So as I said, you would start it like a letter, like you're writing a formal letter, which I know feels like a long time since we did that. And then 1-2 sentences, who you are, why you're applying, and then say 3 sentences from your resume in terms of what's relevant to the role that you have in experience or skills. So 3 sentences max. If you like this, read on. Here's my resume is attached. And then that sort of final sentence is really how I would structure that one page. And read it out loud, see if it reads well or if it feels clunky. It should be in full sentences as well. And even if you're writing it as an email, it should still read like a letter. So sometimes emails can be a lot more casual and informal. When it comes to a cover letter email, it should still read like a formal letter.
Should we put some designs, bullet points, or better not to?
I wouldn't in a cover letter unless you're applying for a graphic design or a marketing role in a really upcoming tech company where you want to show a bit of personality. As I said, full sentences, not bullet points for a cover letter. And they can be quite plain. Black and white is fine. That's not going to go against your application chances at all. So moving on then to your resume. So as I said, it's okay for your resume to repeat what was in your cover letter. There will be a lot more detail in your resume. As I said, they should complement each other, so they should match. It shouldn't read like one's for one person and one's for another person. In your resume, they're best formatted in bullet points. So unlike your cover letter, feel free to put as many bullet points as it makes sense in your resume. And also headings and subheadings really help a hiring manager scan through to get to the important sections and subsections. So putting things like education, qualifications, prior experience are all totally acceptable headings. And again, there are a number of really great templates available online that you can use. And also there are some great templates in Google. So if you use Google Word or Microsoft Word, there will be templates that will be called resume that you can use, and it will have it pre-populated, the sections pre-populated for you with headings so that you can just easily start typing in what's relevant to you. So that will save you a lot of time and it will look really professional as well. A really interesting article from ladders.com, which I read a few years ago, said the average resume only gets 6 seconds of attention by a recruiter. So 6 seconds is nothing. My 10-month-old baby can give me more attention than that. So you really need to make sure that you are precise, it's clear, you're using the right language, so the keywords from the jobs and off a company website, if you read the company website, before you lose the recruiter's interest and they move on to another application. So not to put pressure on, but it's really important. So here I've tried to include, without a template, these are the things, the minimum things that you should include. So your name, and use your full name. Or if you have a preferred name, you'd like to be referred to as something shorter than your full name, that is totally fine. Your contact information, and for this it would be an email and a phone number. Social media or a website, I would say only include if you are okay with a future employer seeing the information on there. So make sure it's relevant. You don't want them having access to your Facebook account and seeing photos from when you were 14 years old and maybe a bit more loose and out there than you are now presenting as a professional. So if you are in an industry like marketing, PR and events where it's relevant, absolutely include those links. But just make sure that you've done your checks beforehand and that you're presenting the best self and best version of you possible, because they will pre-screen before you might get invited to an interview. So just check your settings to make sure you're comfortable. And again, feel free to say your preferred contact. So again, if you're still overseas, in Poland, for example, you can say email is preferred because of the time zone difference. It absolutely makes sense. So then a lot of the templates that you look at for resumes will have an objective statement or a summary. That is optional. If you would like to include that, you absolutely can, but it's not necessary. It's not mandatory. What's really important is your work experience and listing the most relevant first. So whether that's your most recent or something that's more relevant to the job that you're applying for, then feel free to swap it around to make sure that's what they read first. Because if you think you start from top to bottom, so you want your most important information first as you go down the page of your resume. Highlight your achievements rather than duties or responsibilities. So I managed a team of 10 people versus I was responsible for opening emails for my boss. Really doesn't have the same wow factor, right? If any of your achievements can be backed up with stats or data, fantastic. So I had 3 awards when I was in this role, or I managed a team of 10, or I achieved a 20% reduction in staff costs in the time I was in this role. Anything that can put some numbers or context is really worthwhile to back up what you're saying. Again, remember you've scanned key terms from the job ad and the website beforehand, and make sure you use that language and those keywords in your resume where it's appropriate. Make sure that you include any education, certificates, professional memberships or licenses like a driver's license, license to work with children, anything like that that is relevant. Even if it's still Ukrainian, what you can do is have a line underneath that saying you would be willing to get the equivalent certificate or license in Australia. So if you don't have it, that's fine. Say that you're willing to get that. And that would really help an employer know. So rather than just going, oh, you don't have it in Australia, oh, but they're willing to do that. A lot of the time jobs take time before someone comes through the door, and it could be 2 or 4 weeks. And that could give you 2 or 4 weeks to get something translated from Ukrainian to English, or a certification or qualification translated to the equivalent in Australia. So really important to include that to make sure that you're open to doing that. And it will definitely help you in terms of applying for a role. And then skills, the skills option or heading is really only if it's relevant for a role. Usually I wouldn't include this because I think that your work experience and your achievements should cover this off. If you are listing skills, make sure that they can be backed up and they're not what we call in Australia soft skills, like I am hardworking. The laziest person in the world can write on their resume, I am hardworking. As an employer, I know that. So what you could do to prove that you're hardworking is stick to things like I am studying X, or I'm studying full-time, I am a primary caregiver if you want to give some personal information, or showing that you're hardworking because of your career history, so there's no gaps in your career history, or that you do volunteer work or something on top of just the day-to-day to show that you're really committed and you're dedicated and you're hardworking rather than just saying it. Hopefully that made sense. And at the bottom there, that last point, awards or extracurriculars, that means something you do outside of your paid job. So were you a coach of your children's soccer team? Or are you really interested in bushwalks or kayaking or ballet or the orchestra? Putting something at the end of your resume that gives them a bit of a sense of who you are is a great way to start a conversation and to appeal to the human at the other end. So they might read in your resume that you coached football, and they might start a conversation with you in the interview around, oh, I saw that you coach your son's, or you used to coach your son's football team. Do you follow the English Premier League or the European Cup? And then that's a way for you to have a conversation and say, Madrid had a terrible season last year or something like that. So it just gives you a foot in the door, makes you a bit more personable, and it's a way for you to show what is important to you or what you value. So I would always recommend putting something brief there. Again, could be 1 or 2 words, 1 bullet point. It doesn't need to be long, and it's only what you feel comfortable sharing, but it's something that I would recommend is really valued in Australia. So then this slide here was just a bit of fun, but it is the do's and don'ts. And literally, if you Google resume do's and don'ts, this is one of the first things that come up. So it's really just to summarize what I've already spoken about. But if we look, not to be negative, but if we look on the don't side, it's all about keeping it brief and simple with points rather than sentences. If you have any gaps of unemployment because you were having a baby or you were changing jobs or you are moving countries, I think people are very sensitive to what is happening at the moment. It's okay to have that listed in your resume, but just feel comfortable to provide an explanation. I don't think you need to explain why you currently have a gap in employment, but if there was one 5 years ago or a year ago, you could just put 1 sentence in italics saying started a family or moved countries or went back to study or changed jobs, changed industries. That is totally fine. Just have something prepared there to sort of explain it rather than trying to hide it, because you should count on the person reading your resume. They will check and they will look at the dates. And if there's a 5-year gap in between roles, it's normal that they would ask why. On the references point, I was thinking about this for people moving over here and also the time difference. It's okay to say email is the preferred contact once you do provide your references. If you're concerned that your referee may not be available for contact, because they're either still in the Ukraine or they're traveling, there is a way that you can phrase that with the employer so that you could have a pre-written reference if that's possible to organise. So your referee just writes 1 standard reference letter for you. Make sure they date it so that it is in the last 12 months, it's relevant. Otherwise, a lot of the time people will say references are available on the request. And that gives you time to contact the referee to check how they're going. Are they okay to receiving an email or a phone call? And you can work out the best way to put them in contact with your future employer. Rather than them calling twice, your referee is still stuck in the Ukraine and is unable to answer their phone, or et cetera, et cetera. It just avoids additional stress that isn't needed for any party in that situation. So my recommendation would be, if you can get a pre-written reference check, that's fantastic. Otherwise, just say available upon request, and make sure that you've got time to contact your referee and have a couple in mind just in case one's unavailable for whatever reason. And the last thing there that I'd like to pull out is too much information. Do not let your resume go past 3 pages. Even the most senior role an applicant can give you a resume with 3 pages. And that doesn't mean you get tricky and you change the margins and the size of the wording. Still keep that standard, but just make it succinct, make it short and relevant. Cut out the student job that you have that is not relevant to the role you're applying for, or if you used to babysit your neighbour's children, not relevant, pull it out of your resume. I'll just pause there. Do we have any questions?
Is it okay to pull out some sections that are not relevant to the job, but are pretty recent? Especially when people come to Australia, maybe from the beginning they do some casual jobs that they don't want to tell a potential employer about. Yeah. Some survival jobs.
Yeah, that is totally fine. Absolutely, you can take that out. What I would say is if you get to the stage of an interview and they ask, have some pre-prepared responses if they ask. And it could be as simple as what you just said there in terms of I had a number of casual roles. They're not relevant to this job at hand, but they were necessary for me to earn some money, something really basic like that. Every employer will understand. They won't have experienced that potentially, but they will understand. And you've provided an answer. It's short, but you can absolutely leave that out of your resume, definitely. Okay, so then, as I mentioned, I've spoken to a friend of mine, sorry about the formatting here, a friend of mine who heads up a talent acquisition team for a very large employer in Brisbane who are looking to hire 2,000 roles by June next year. She has a team of 9 under her, and she has over 15 years experience as a recruiter. So if she wasn't so busy with her day job, I would have got her to join us tonight, but she is more than happy to help down the track with individuals. And as they start to post roles, we'd love to share them via this link if they're relevant. But she has had experience recruiting in a really broad range of professions. So everything from someone who lays concrete, building security, cleaners, to lawyers, banking, finance, accountants, receptionists, a really broad range. And I had a few questions that I just fired at her over the phone to get her initial thoughts. And these might be questions that you haven't thought to ask. So should you include a photo on your resume or cover letter? Yes or no? Her response was no, unless it is relevant to the role you are applying for, you can include it in your resume. And what she means by if it's relevant, if you are applying for a role as a receptionist or what we call front of house, concierge, it would be relevant to show that you are well presented and would be suitable for the front of house. And when I say well presented, if you're looking to someone to be a concierge or a front desk, you don't want someone covered in tattoos on their face and their ears being pierced. It's fine to have piercings and tattoos, but just make sure that they can be covered if that's relevant for the job, which for the majority of roles, I would say it is. Then I asked, should you have graphics, fancy colours, headings, images? Her answer was no, unless you're applying for a graphic design role or a marketing role. And then, yes, it should be in line with the company, but really only your resume again. So keep your cover letter quite consistent and quite formal. Resume, yes, if it's relevant for the role. But the majority of the times, those first 2 questions, it was a no. Then I asked about what we call the experience paradox. So you think you would be a great fit for a role, but you haven't had that role before, or you haven't worked in that industry before. Should you still apply? And she said, yes, if you have transferable skills, absolutely feel that you can apply. If you find you don't have skills that relate or can be transferred over, think about if your situation affords you to. What about asking about an internship or unpaid work experience so that you can get experience in that role, in that company, in that industry, or volunteering? And then that way you can put that on your resume or your next application to say that you have had experience working in a gaming organization or experience working in a law firm, for example. Another great suggestion she had is there is so much online skills and training that you can do for free. There are so many videos on YouTube. If you go to Seek or Indeed or some of those links to the recruitment agencies I shared last week, there are heaps of opportunities to upskill online and practice in certain areas. If you want to apply for a role that requires you to have done web development, why don't you look at a course online in web development and practice by creating a web page that you can then list for your employer to have a look at to show that you've had experience creating a web page. Here is an example. Here is my portfolio where I have done this. A lot of these opportunities are free. You can do them after hours when children have gone to sleep if you've got children, unless your baby's like mine, she doesn't sleep at night. But you can do them around what you have going on. I had a friend who used to work for Emirates, the airline, and unfortunately was retrenched as part of COVID. She moved back to Australia and had no experience with computers and wanted to apply for a role that required her to have computer literacy, so experience with computers. And so what she did when she was in lockdown, so she was in mandated lockdown as part of COVID, she went onto LinkedIn and searched for courses with basic and intermediate skills training in Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and I think Visio, which isn't very common, but that was another one that she trained herself up on. She was then able to list that in her resume, saying that she has intermediate experience and skills in these platforms, which helped her get a job with a company that required that. So don't just immediately count yourself out. Have a look at some creative ways to try your luck and to upskill yourself in ways that are relevant to the job. A lot of companies are happy to have people working for free because it saves them money. It gives you an opportunity to experience working for that company. So it's really just around whether they have the staff to be able to support you doing that. But it's a good way for you to get experience in an industry or an organisation if you don't feel like you have the skills or relevant transferable skills. So another question I asked her was, should you list your responsibilities in your resume? And her answer straight away was no. So I'm glad that I was aligned with her there. She said it's not necessary. It takes up extra space in your resume that you could be listing your achievements, your qualifications, your experience. That's what's more important. She agreed 3 pages max. 1 to 2 pages was her preference for a lot of roles. So shorter is better. References, she agreed yes, but then agreed with me around available upon request would be very appropriate for the situation that a number of people would be in. And as I said, just apologies about the formatting here so that you can't see here, but I'll make sure that this is listed out when we have this posted online so you can access it. But again, as a minimum criteria, she said you should list your working rights, so either your current visa or the visa that you were applying for, so that it's clear to an employer what your working rights will be when they come in. Your contact information, education, prior experience, skills and systems that you're familiar with. And again, skills and systems, I would only include if it's mentioned in the job ad. So if they've said they need someone with experience in Adobe, web design, PowerPoint, Excel, Google, that's when I would list it in your resume. Otherwise, leave it out. You can have that conversation in the interview, but if they haven't specifically asked for it, you don't need to put that section in. And again, that will save you some space as well. And then that says achievements rather than responsibilities. As I said, something you did when you were 14, may not be relevant now that you're 35, 40, 50. So again, take it out. Another really important thing to remember in your resume is the language. So make sure that you use active words. And active words are things like simplified, coached, advised, streamlined, maximized, delivered. It just shows ownership and it's more powerful. And these words are more likely to be included in that system that will be scanning your resume and cover letter. Try to use professional fonts. Don't get creative with calligraphy. Make it easy for them to read, particularly if it's at night, for example. And font size should be 10 or 12, no smaller. I think keep your headers simple. So again, using those templates will help you with that. So things like skills, experience, rather than what's great about me or what have I achieved? Just put achievements. Keep it simple, easy to read. And concise bullet points, as I mentioned as well. You don't need full sentences. It's about making it easy for them to read and pick up keywords. It's not about a conversation. That's what the interview's for. Are there any questions?
Yes, Ineke, you've mentioned volunteering. What is the best pathway to get a place in the company, in a professional company where you want to be? Because it's quite easy to get volunteering experience in some toy library or somewhere which is not relevant to a professional area. So, well, how do you apply? It may not even be advertised. How do you knock on that door?
Sure, that's a great question. So for large organizations, so over 200 employees, they will advertise in their careers section volunteering opportunities. If it's not in the careers section, have a look at the student section, so where graduate roles are posted. And a lot of the time there will have vacation roles, which means volunteering. For smaller companies, you're absolutely right, they may not be advertised. In that case, I would have a look at the, if there's a generic email for jobs or careers, and I would email them asking, just again, like your cover letter, explain your background, your situation. I've moved here from the Ukraine. I'm looking to get relevant work experience. I would welcome an opportunity to volunteer or do some unpaid work experience with your organization. These are my working rights. And then just see the response there from the generic email. Or with jobs that are posted online, they'll have a hiring manager or a job contact. And again, I would send them an email. So similar layout to the cover letter, send that to them and see if they could direct you to the right person within the organization. And make sure that the language is really clear. Like, I would welcome the opportunity. I'm very interested in gaining relevant Australian work experience. I'm really interested in working for your company one day, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, there are a number of organisations in Australia that help with volunteer work. A great one I would recommend is called Suited to Success. And I actually talk about them a bit more in tomorrow's presentation around interview skills, but they are a not-for-profit organisation that help individuals from disadvantaged backgrounds apply for jobs, and a number of those are volunteer work. So this organisation started from a place of getting donations for clothing, for professional clothing for people who couldn't afford or had lost everything in a fire, a flood, or moving country, and didn't have appropriate outfits to wear to interviews. And this organisation started by receiving donated good quality office attire that they could help dress people to then go to an interview. And it became so popular that they expanded to provide career advice and actually now link up with employers. So they can help with direct contacts into employers in a number of industries, from hospitality through to law firms, to help people get back on their feet. So I'm not paid by them, and I have never worked with them directly, but I do think they're a great organisation operating in Brisbane, and I think they operate in other states as well. But they could be a good place to start and to have a look for volunteering or unpaid experience.
Yeah, that's
But
great
also,
advice.
yeah, they're fantastic, and they have there's volunteer opportunities also posted on Seek. You just put in a keyword search and it will come up there as well. So unpaid opportunities. So the only thing to keep in mind with volunteering or unpaid work is you need to check your the requirements on your visa. So if you're on a tourist visa, then you're restricted to even do unpaid work. If you're on a student visa or a study visa, you are restricted to doing 30 hours of unpaid work in a year. So that's really not a lot. So just make sure that your visa, it's clear in your visa how much you can do, and just because it's unpaid, make sure that you understand if there are any hours limits as well.
Well, now people arrive on a tourist visa, but fairly quickly they get transferred to a visa with full working rights, so which is good. And yes, I think volunteering is a good step to start with. How long do you think the volunteering experience can last? Like, people wouldn't want to work for months and months, for half a year in a volunteering position. What would be the appropriate term for that?
I mean, it really depends on the industry. I would say minimum a week. But again, it doesn't need to be full days. It could be a few hours here or there. And again, I don't know many people that could afford to do volunteer work and not get paid for months and months and months of the year, because people need to eat and feed families. So really it depends on the industry and how many hours you're doing. But I'd say a week would give you a good sense and give them a good sense. Up to, I don't know, a month would be my gut, but there's no rule book really there, because it depends, as I said, on the industry. But you want to make sure that you're not being taken advantage of, because employers would love to have free employees, right? But you have valuable experience from your home country. It's about getting relevant experience in Australia. It shouldn't be you starting from scratch. So in terms of what would be a long enough time to put on your resume, 1 day or 2 days, you could list that on your resume that you've done volunteer work with Channel 9 or in this law firm. That is completely acceptable to list a day's work. I think as well, you don't need to say that you did 2 weeks volunteering. You would just have volunteering as a heading and then say the organisation. You don't need to say whether it was 1 hour or 60.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Inika. That was very interesting. I have found out something that I didn't know before. So we're meeting tomorrow again, and the same time tomorrow. And our tomorrow's topic will be about
interview skills. Yes.
The part which many people are so much afraid of.
And it's normal to be afraid of interviews. I find them nervous and nerve-wracking as well, and I'm often the person sitting on the interview panel interviewing people, and I still get nervous. So that's completely normal. Hopefully tomorrow I can help with some tips on how to prepare to get you as comfortable as possible, what to wear, things to take with you. And again, I have interviewed my friend who's the talent acquisition manager, to get her insights as well, so that I have got them included there to help you out. And she had some great tips that I didn't even know or had thought about. So that was really helpful for me as well. So hopefully today's session was useful and you enjoyed it. And hopefully you join us tomorrow for interview tips and skills. I always love to give people some homework. So again, just keep checking on your visa, get to know your industry and market, as I said, if there are any gaps you think in your resume from reading some job ads that you think you need to work on, have a look online at courses, equipment, certificates that you might need, and just have a look at different drafts and templates available. So have a go at updating your resume, have a look at the templates in Australia. You can do something as simple as Google Australian resume, and it will come up with like 50 options for you to select from, and you can pick the one that you think is best suited to you.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Thanks so much, Inika. And I'll see you tomorrow. Mm-hmm.
Great.